Well, hello everyone, how are you doing this fine day? Hope you're enjoying your week. Welcome to another survival challenge, in particular, an Arcane survival challenge. Now, let me give you a couple of caveats. We are, in fact, going over Arcane, not League of Legends. We're going over the Netflix series. And the reason for that is because the way these challenges work is that we take characters and have characters interact with one another, interact with the world, and see how things might go if you introduce these characters into this universe. And it's just a lot clearer what characters will do and who characters are in Arcane than it is in the video game. We just have a far clearer picture of the world in the show because, you know, it's a fucking show and not a video game with like text lore. This would also include the powers and abilities of the characters. I'm sure these characters are more powerful in the League of Legends game because that's just usually how it works. But we're not going over the game versions. This is the show version specifically. So if there's some crazy shit that happens in the game that I'm ignoring, that's why. It's not about the game, it's the show. Last caveat, something I don't normally do, I am going to give a spoiler warning. I don't usually do them because I think it's kind of implied in the video that there's going to be spoilers based on just what the video is and what it's about. However, Arcane Season 2 literally just ended over the weekend, so I feel like you kind of have to give a spoiler warning here. And if you enjoy the video, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, enjoy the membership. Remember, if you join the membership, you get videos early. But I'm wasting up your time. Let's get started. First things first, we have to talk about the world that the challenge takes place in, which is Piltover. Now, Piltover works a little bit differently in the show than it does in the game. To my understanding, in the game, there's the city of Piltover, which exists on top of the city of Zaun. They don't get along, Zaun is treated poorly, but they are two completely distinct cities. In the show, it seemed like Piltover is just the whole city. There is no Zaun, there's just the Undercity, which is a section of Piltover, and Silco, who is in charge of Undercity, basically wants to make Undercity its own independent nation separate from Piltover, called Zaun, but he doesn't actually achieve that goal in his lifetime. So Zaun and Piltover don't really exist yet as far as the show is concerned. It's just all Piltover. And as I said, Piltover is divided by two sections. There's the Upper City and the Undercity. The Upper City is like filled with nerds and libraries and shit, and everybody's super smart and well off and rich and awesome and everything's really cool and peaceful. And then you go down to the Undercity and it's just this polluted hellhole wasteland with all sorts of crime and debauchery and all sorts of horrible bullshit going on down there. And it's basically just run by a bunch of different gangs who are all into different horrible shit like drug dealing and prostitution and murder and all that bullshit, with one guy who has the most powerful criminal organization ruling over all of it being Silco. Now we go back up top to Piltover, things work a little bit differently. Piltover as a whole is considered worldwide across all of Runeterra, which is the name of the whole planet, I suppose, in the League of Legends universe, as the City of Progress. It is essentially the entire world's capital for scientific progress. All the smart people go to Piltover because they have the best schools, they have the best libraries, all the greatest philosophers and scientists, and any big brain people go on over to Piltover to get bigger brains. Super, super smart people. Well, I mean, not that smart, because they're not smart enough to realize that if they pump all their fucking pollution down to this other city below them, they're gonna piss those people off and cause a fucking civil war, which is exactly what ends up happening. But you know, book smarts don't always translate to regular smarts. So within the story of Arcane, you have this character known as Jace, who is essentially this very, very young scientist who, because he was a young child and was saved by this guy using magic, he's like obsessed with bringing magic back into the world because Piltover doesn't really have magic, they don't deal with it, it's considered this sort of taboo thing. And over the course of his experiments, he actually does. He creates this sort of blend of magic as well as technology, creating what is known as hex tech. Now, originally he just wants to make this in order to help people, but it's not long before they start using it to make fucking weapons and shit because, of course, they're all humans. That's what humans do. Literally any technology invented by any human in the history of the world is used for one of two things: war or pornography. Silco and the Undercity eventually do something pretty similar where it's not hex tech, but they basically start experimenting with all kinds of like toxins and different types of chemical agents, and they create something called Shimmer, which is basically like the reverse of hex tech. So then you end up having these two nations, kind of not nations, really not liking each other, one using hex tech, the other one using Shimmer, and basically the show is about the relationship between these two places and all the different characters, their opposing viewpoints, and certain characters kind of siding with one side more than another. The characters will betray their own places and go to other places. It's all that good Game of Thronesian type shit that you like, but just in this sort of punk sci-fi universe with kind of pseudo magic technology and shit. It's a really good show. If you haven't seen the show, go check it out. But the point is that this is the world that our characters are going to get thrusted into, and let's see how they do. Now, I will say I'm going to be ordering this list a little differently than usual. Normally, I put the person who would do the worst first, and then it slowly goes to the person who will do the best. I'm not really doing that this time because this isn't like a versus match. It's not like a survival thing where they're going to be taking on the whole universe or anything. It's really just how they're going to live in this world that they find themselves in, and like just how they'll exist here. So the order is just going to be whatever fucking order I feel like talking about. And obviously, since that's the case, Rambo's clearly going to go first. You don't not put Rambo first if you have the option. And you might be looking at me with them crazy Bug Rodney Dangerfield look at eyes, thinking to yourself, why is Rambo even here? Rambo's not a science fiction character. This is stupid, Rouga. Your love for Rambo is infecting the quality of your videos now. You can't just shove him into everything even when he doesn't belong. And my response to that would be that Rambo kills over 300 people in Rambo Part 2. Takes him like 45 minutes to do it. Are you really gonna stand there, look at me with a straight face and say that that's not science fiction? Yeah, I didn't think so. So stop being such a smartass and just enjoy the video. So this Rambo section is gonna be pretty interesting because we have to talk about politics. Ooh, it just like makes you like quiver just when you hear it, don't it? But there's really no other way to do this because Rambo is inherently a political character. His movies are always political movies, and the actual show of Arcane has extremely strong political themes all the way through it. In order to figure out what Rambo would do, we have to look at his political symbolism in his own films and sort of apply that to the Arcane show to kind of determine exactly what's gonna go down. So for the absolute dog shit human beings, waste of flesh that have not seen Rambo, let me tell you a little bit about Rambo. So the original film First Blood was a very clear political statement. It released shortly after the Vietnam War and was making a statement specifically about the treatment of vets coming back from Vietnam in America. 3 characters in First Blood are very clear representations of the political stance that people within the country had at the time. The sheriff being the stand-in for left-wing politics, the colonel being a stand-in for right-wing politics, and Rambo himself, who is just like the Vietnam soldier coming back from war. Now, throughout the movie, the sheriff is constantly treating Rambo like shit. He doesn't like him. He doesn't respect him. Just the fact that he was in the Vietnam War makes him absolutely despise this man. The statement here is pretty clear. When Vietnam soldiers came back from Vietnam, left-wingers were absolutely hating on them. They were calling them baby killers. They were protesting them even going to the war. They considered them all evil, horrible people. They were not being treated well when they got back. Now, you go on the other side of the colonel, and he's standing for right-wing politics, and basically what they were saying with his character was essentially that he was just sort of indifferent, right? Like, he plays this role of being a caring mentor to the Rambo character who trains him, gets him ready for war, tosses him into the war, but then completely forgets about him after he's done fighting his war for him. Rambo goes through all sorts of horrors while he's over there, sees all his friends die, develops PTSD, and then comes back to America and just straight up can't function like a normal person. And the colonel has absolutely no idea. The sin of the colonel is complete indifference to the suffering of the people who he sent over there in the first place. The creator of First Blood, as well as Sylvester Stallone, has said that Rambo is a neutral party. He's not supposed to be a stand-in for any politics. He's just the pain that's been left behind from the terrible actions of both sides. This is what the movie was originally supposed to be about. However, it's not. And the reason why it's not is because the ending of First Blood was changed in the writing process. So originally, Rambo was supposed to die via suicide. The colonel was supposed to show up to talk Rambo down, and he fails, and Rambo kills himself. If this did end up being the ending of the film, it would have very clearly made its purpose known that both the colonel and the sheriff are wrong, and it leads to the death of this innocent man. However, Sylvester Stallone convinced them of changing the ending and allowing his character to live, and the studio was like, yeah, because sequel potential. This is Hollywood. By making it so that Rambo lives, it changes what the story means, because now you have the sheriff treating Rambo like shit, And when the colonel comes up to help him, the colonel is successful and actually does help him and gets him out and on the road to rehabilitation. This means that the movie's original goal of being kind of in the middle and attacking both sides of the political spectrum and how they treated the vets is no longer that, because the colonel succeeds in helping him. So now it's just sort of a right-wing film that's attacking the left-wingers simply due to that small change of having Rambo live. And from First Blood on, every single film has gotten more and more right-wing leaning as Sylvester Stallone, an actual right-winger, has taken over the story. I mean, shit, Rambo 4 has themes of God, faith, and the treatment of missionaries overseas, as well as an anti-pacifist message where the film actually supports violence during times of war and talks about the necessity of that violence. By the time you get to the last one, Last Blood, it's literally just a critique on the southern border and how we need stronger borders. I mean, Rambo straight up takes on human traffickers across the southern border. It's so blatantly Republican. And the initial goal of First Blood during the writing process, which was to be like a sort of a middle stand, it just doesn't exist anymore. Rambo might be the most right-wing film series that we have in modern cinema. That and maybe the Dark Knight trilogy, because it's really hard to argue the Dark Knight trilogy is not also a right-wing film series. Now, going over to Arcane, they also say some pretty interesting things about politics. It's not so much like left-wing and right-wing. It's not like, you know, Piltover is right-wing and Zahn is left-wing. There's sort of right-wing and left-wing characters spread across the entire show, and it influences and dictates the decisions of those characters. And there will be times where it sort of looks like it demonizes right-wing beliefs and then sort of praises left-wing beliefs, but that's not actually true. Like, for instance, if we're talking about Zahn, Echo is clearly a good guy. There's no way you can look at him to where he's not. He's also a very left-wing character. I mean, his goal is to straight up start a fucking commune where everyone can live equally in this sort of egalitarian paradise. Doesn't get more left-wing than that. But if you look at the other side of that coin in Zahn, you have Silco, who's very clearly the villain of season 1 of Arcane. He's also a super hardcore capitalist and businessman, and essentially creates the hierarchy within Zahn that exists. So if you look at that on a very surface level, it seems like left-wing stuff good, right-wing stuff bad. But if you look a little bit closer, that's not necessarily the case. While Echo is the good character, he's also completely ineffective of doing the things that he wants to do. He constantly blames other characters for stopping him, like Jinx and Silco, but once Silco is gone, it creates this massive power vacuum where a bunch of other people try to step in and take it, and Echo still can't create his utopia all the way to the end of season 2. He's still not capable of doing it. While Silco, being the objectively more evil character, was actually a lot closer to achieving his goal of a more perfect Zahn that Echo couldn't possibly achieve without him. So Zahn shows pretty clearly that you have Echo, the good left-wing but ineffective character, against Silco, the bad right-winger that's way more effective at actually getting the things that he needs and that he wants and bringing peace and prosperity to Zahn. Now, don't get me wrong, they both fail, but Silco is very clearly shown to be the more effective Primarch of those two characters. And this is sort of the way it works across the entire series. Who's good, who's bad, who's right, who's wrong, and their political affiliation is just sort of all kind of mixed around. And due to this, it makes it feel like the show doesn't actually have its own political message, but instead, within the show, all the different characters just sort of have many different standings of which side they're on, without the show really picking a side. And it just makes all the characters in the world as a whole feel way more real than otherwise would. If you take someone like Rambo and you chuck him into the universe, let's say at the beginning, like episode 4, after all the backstory stuff is done, Silco's in charge of the Undercity, Caitlin, Vi, and Jinx are full grown, Hex Tech is invented, all this shit's all good to go. How exactly will Rambo react to this world, given what we know about him and the world of Arcane as a whole? Well, for one, I think it's pretty clear he's way more likely to live in a place like Zahn than he is in a place like Piltover up top. And the reason why that is pretty clear. He suffers from PTSD, and Rambo, depending on what time period you put him in, like what part of his life he's currently going through, because younger versions of Rambo, I would say, are more likely to live in Zahn, whereas possibly older versions might live in Piltover. But the thing is that because of his PTSD, he has a very hard time functioning in normal life. He has to be near war at all times for him to even be comfortable. That's why even if you go into something like Rambo 4, where he's in his fucking 60s, he still lives right down the street from an ongoing war zone. He's an American. He can go home anytime he wants to. He doesn't, because he can't fucking function there properly. Every single movie up until Last Blood, he's shown incapable of functioning in normal life. He has to be around violence, death, and war, which is why him being in Zaun just makes way more sense. Piltover is too normal and happy to the average person for him to spend any real time up there. I see Rambo starting some kind of shop or something in Zaun and just sort of living his normal life as this kind of older guy. Maybe he'll be like a hunter or some other kind of day job and just sort of living his life very normally. I don't think he's going to go out of his way to starting shit with people. The only real possibility in season 1 is maybe he might have some issues with what Silco's doing down there. But for the most part, I think he's probably going to let that go as well. I don't think he's really going to get involved in that, because Rambo generally doesn't get involved in shit unless it affects him or people that he cares about in his own life. And I don't see Silco going out of his way to fuck with Rambo if Rambo doesn't want to fuck with him. So season 1 Arcane Rambo is going to be very, very dull. It's not really going to do anything for the most part. Season 2 Rambo is where shit's going to get a little bit different. That's where the war really starts to rage on between Zaun and Piltover. And specifically, one thing is going to happen that's going to make it almost impossible for Rambo to not intervene in some way. And that is Piltover, specifically Caitlyn, ends up flooding Zaun with this thing called the Grey and poisoning everyone in Zaun because of this rage-fueled manhunt she's got going on where she wants to catch Jinx because Jinx killed her mother. If this bitch floods all of Zaun with these toxic gases and rampages into people's homes, beats the shit out of them, arrests people unjustly, and does basically what any first world country would consider as tyranny or war crimes, that's the point where I think you're going to start seeing Rambo have to get involved, because now you're not just poisoning his air, but you're poisoning the air of literally everyone around him. He's gonna start seeing children choking in the middle of the streets because of the shit that Caitlyn is doing. And this is where Rambo's gonna have to get involved. And this is the interesting part, and where you kind of see, like, Arcane is a pretty well-written show. Caitlyn and Vi and all these characters are the good guys. They're the heroes trying to stop all the bad shit from happening. Jinx is generally the bad guy. But because of how the story is written, how no character is purely evil and no character is purely good, we're gonna have a situation where Rambo, the objectively good character in every Rambo movie, is gonna be going after the good guys of Arcane, Caitlyn and Vi and all of them, because they're fucking up all sorts of shit in Zaun. They're doing shit that's clearly wrong, and Rambo will be going after them. Then the question becomes, how will he do? Well, physically speaking, he's not as strong as any other character, especially considering that they have Hex Tech. I mean, he may do okay, maybe, against Vi in a fist fight, sort of, but if you give Vi her Hex Tech gauntlets, there really isn't any conversation to be had. She's a superhuman being at that point. Rambo, I think his best feat is like lifting a guy up in the air with one arm and then ripping his throat out with the other hand. And I mean, that's cool. Like, it's definitely peak human levels of strength, but he's not fighting like mechs and shit, which is what Vi ends up having to do using those fucking gauntlets. So if Rambo is going to go after him, he's going to go after them via stealth. And do I think that he can stealth his way and take out Caitlyn and her whole team? Yes, I do. None of them have any evidence that they're good at fighting off against stealth. Caitlyn has some stealth abilities, but nothing even close to what Rambo has shown in his films. On top of that, Rambo is also an expert tracker, hunter, demolitions expert. If he wants to kill Caitlyn's people, he will kill Caitlyn's people. If he wants to find Jinx, like, let's say, there's a couple different ways he can go about this, right? He can go after Caitlyn's people and take them all out. Seems a little uncharacteristic considering that none of those people are really like bad guys. However, you can also argue that Rambo is a soldier in war, and he doesn't really worry himself about if the people he's fighting against are good or bad. He just knows it's a soldier, they're soldiers. In war, soldiers kill each other. So he may not even look at it in a moral way and just be like, this is Zaun, this is where I live, these are the people that I know, you're poisoning it, you're coming, you're doing all this shit, I don't care if you're good or evil, I have to kill you because you're coming in on our territory. And if that's the way he ends up looking at it, I don't think he's gonna have any issues killing them all. He's gonna pick them all off one by one, and I don't think there's gonna be a whole lot he can do to stop them. Another option he could do is actually find Jinx. He may, to stop a possible war that will happen, go off and locate Jinx and possibly team up with Jinx, maybe even capture her and turn her in so that they leave Zaun alone. That's also possible. I don't think that that's most likely, though. Honestly, I think what's most likely is he's going to go after that team. But even if he did go after that team and he took out Caitlyn and all of her people, that wouldn't necessarily end the problem, because the problem is Mbessa, and that would just sort of prolong the inevitable, which is Zahn and Piltover will be going to war. There's nothing you can do about that. And when that war ends up happening and that war comes to his home, he will be getting involved, and he will most likely be fighting for Zahn, because that's where he lives and those are the people that he knows. But at the end of the day, the biggest issue he's going to have is if he's not in Piltover, he's not going to have access to Hex Tech weapons. Not unless he either goes to them to try and acquire it or steal it, or if he runs into Jinx at some point, maybe Jinx might give him one. I don't know how likely that is. Rambo and Jinx might actually see sort of like kindred spirits in one another, because they're both seriously psychologically damaged by horrible events of their past. And that could actually breed into some very interesting character moments. In fact, I actually like that. The possibility that Rambo may actually not join up with Jinx, but become friendly enough with Jinx that they sort of become allies. That might actually happen. It really depends on what point in the timeline Rambo meets Jinx, because Jinx in season 1 is just straight up a terrorist. She's blowing shit up, she's causing all sorts of problems, she herself is a problem. If he meets her at that point, I don't think he's gonna like her very much. They may even come to blows. But if he meets her in season 2, which he doesn't really have any reason to meet her before season 2, she's more of a freedom fighter, and she's sort of fighting for the beliefs that Silco had in an independent Zahn and fighting for her people. And if he meets her at that point, they're kind of very similar people. And those feelings they end up having for each other that is going to start off as sort of like a kindred spirits may actually evolve into some sort of form of romance. Like I said, it depends on where in the timeline they meet, because remember, Rambo and Rambo 2 was like in his mid-20s. He fell in love in that movie. It's not like they've never done romance with Rambo before. And Rambo's never really met anyone like himself. He's always the most damaged fucking dude. So if he meets another person who he sees this sort of same thing into, who's a soldier and a warrior just like he is, and who's fighting for, like, I could see that. I could see a sort of Jinx Rambo romance happening. That would be really cool, actually. In fact, if that is the case, and Jinx has someone else to love and someone else to care about other than Vi and Silco, she won't go down the sort of dark path that she goes down at the end of season 1. And in season 2, where she gets to the point that she's just straight up gonna kill herself and she's lost all hope, if anyone is gonna pull her out of that, I think Rambo would be a pretty decent person to do it. Now, in the show, Echo's the one that ends up doing it. But if you have Rambo there instead, I think he'd probably have a lot easier time doing it, because he knows exactly what she's going to. They have both tried to commit suicide at one point or another because of the traumatic shit that's happened to them over the course of their lives. He may even be able to be there at the end of season 2 to save Jinx from dying. Now, the only real issue I see with having Rambo in this story is without any form of Hex Tech, without using Shimmer, which I don't see him using, and just his basic weapons, he's gonna be severely underpowered in most straight up face-to-face confrontations, and I think he's gonna have a hard time avoiding face-to-face confrontations. Like, if he ever does get into a fight with Vi, or ever does get into a fight with Jinx, or Caitlyn, or any of these characters who have these sort of Hex Tech weapons and these super powered abilities, he's gonna have a really hard time fighting against them, and he'll probably die. And especially towards the end, when they're fighting an army of the Victor robots, those robots go so fucking fast, he won't even be able to react to them. I mean, characters in Arcane can't react to them, so I don't see why Rambo would be able to, since his speed is that of like a normal fucking person. So in summary, I think Rambo's gonna do a lot of really, really cool shit. I think he's gonna have a lot of cool interactions with different characters. I think he's gonna be an enemy of Piltover and an ally to Zahn. I think he's going to get really close with Jinx. But I do think at some point, if he joins this war, which he absolutely will, he needs Hex Tech weapons. If he doesn't have Hex Tech weapons, he will die. If he does have Hex Tech weapons, he'll probably make it to the end okay. Next up, we have Judge Dredd. So Dredd comes from a world that works very differently than that of Arcane. In his world, he's a police officer, but in a world that doesn't have judges, basically. Like, they don't have judges or courtrooms or anything like that. In the Judge Dredd universe, the police officers are called judges, and they are judge, jury, and executioner. It is their job to find the crimes, dictate what that crime is, and then dole out the punishment for that crime. They decide all of it, and Judge Dredd is one of these people. The thing that makes Judge Dredd so flawed and also so fucking awesome is his unwavering sociopathic tendency to follow the rule of law to a T, regardless of any outstanding circumstances. He won't negotiate. He's not going to have a bleeding heart for you. He doesn't care what your past trauma is. If you break the law and the law says that this needs to happen to you because you broke that law, that's what's going to happen to you. It doesn't matter what you do is not going to change that. At one point, this chick had a bomb strapped to this massive building. In the Judge Dredd universe, there are these giant skyscrapers that are like massive mega structures that have whole cities worth of people inside of them. Anyway, this bitch had a bomb strapped to it, and she's like, hey, you know what? I know I did a lot of crimes and you want to kill me, but if you don't kill me and do something like send me to jail or just anything else but kill me, I won't blow this fucking building up. And he told her to her face while she had the bomb strapped to her, no bitch, you're gonna die. That's the only outcome that will possibly happen for you is death. I don't care if I die with you. I don't care what happens to all these fucking people. You will die because that's what the law says needs to happen. And he will do it in as brutal a way as he sees fit. He is an unreasonable force of law. To quote Sylvester Stallone, I am the law. And despite that movie being utterly terrible, that does more or less encompass exactly what kind of person Judge Dredd is. I mean, don't be wrong, he wouldn't say anything that cheesy, but that is what he is. So if Judge Dredd showed up in the Arcane universe, what exactly would happen to him? Well, as clear as day. Judge Dredd is a cop. He comes in the Arcane universe, he's gonna be a fucking cop. There's nothing else that he could be. He's a cop down into his very bones. And the only people that he could be a cop for in Arcane is that Piltover police force that's armored with like fucking hellgassed, those guys. He's gonna be one of those. And this brings up a very interesting question that needs to be answered. In his universe, the judges, the cops, judges, same thing, they have basically limitless power to do whatever it is they want. And Judge Dredd's not going to have that in the Arcane universe. So if he is made a police officer, he's no longer going to be a judge that he normally is. The question becomes, is he going to support this new law that exists within Piltover, or is he still going to feel like he is bound to the code of law in his own universe? I personally think it's going to be kind of a hard shift for him to make, but I do think he's going to make it. I don't think that he's going to be this brutal mass murderer like he is in his universe, because this new universe, he would be breaking the law if he did that. And Judge Dredd cannot and will not break the law. His own feelings on it is not relevant. He must follow the law under any circumstances. It's just a part of who he is. It's how he sees order being made in any given situation. Like, everyone must follow the law 100% all the time, even him. While he will easily be the most brutal police officer that exists within the Piltover Police Department, I don't think he'll ever step out of the bounds to actually breaking the law and become a corrupt police officer, because here's another thing, he absolutely despises police corruption. He fucking hates it, which is going to be very interesting if he joins the police department, because there's a decent amount of corruption there. At the beginning of the series, there's this, I forgot the character's name, but he's this Asian guy. He's the sheriff in season 1 of Arcane. He's actually on the payroll working for Silco, who's a mob boss of Zon. If Judge Dredd finds out that his boss, the sheriff, is a corrupt cop, he's killing that man fucking immediately. He's not even going to wait. He's going to murder him. There is no way this story can go where Judge Dredd finds out that the sheriff is actually a corrupt cop and he doesn't die. And it's very unlikely he won't find this out, because Judge Dredd has Batman levels of fucking detective ability. He's gonna discover it very quickly. Now, is he gonna kill the sheriff if that's considered something that's illegal? Probably, but he's probably gonna do it in a way that is legal. Like, I think he's going to get the evidence that he needs to prove that the sheriff is guilty, and then reveal that evidence, and then take out the sheriff. That's what I think is probably going to happen. Once that happens, it's very possible that Piltover might desire to make him the new sheriff. He'll reject it because he likes being in the field. He's never going to want to be sheriff. I think the sheriff thing is still going to end up going to Caitlin, and I think Caitlin is absolutely going to fucking hate Judge Dredd, because she's going to see him as way too brutal, way too violent. She's almost going to see him as kind of a corrupt police officer, even though he's not corrupt. But I think he's brutal enough that she'll probably view him as a corrupt cop, even if he's not. That is until the events of season 2 roll around. I think in season 1, you're basically going to have him going into Zon a lot and Piltover, beating the living shit out of criminals, taking them out, bringing them to prison, doing whatever it is he's got to do, following the law, but just being very, very brutal as he does it. And then when season 2 rolls around and Zaun gets into an actual war with Piltover and Caitlyn's mother dies and she becomes a far more brutal and dark character hunting Jinx, I think at that point Caitlyn's going to have a bit of a change of heart when it comes to Judge Dredd, because now that's someone who she can actually use to help get her revenge. So when she creates that little squad, the one that I said that Rambo's probably going to have an issue with and going to go after, he will very likely be on it. Because Caitlyn is going to see his value at that point, and more importantly, Ambessa, who is a very high-ranking member of the military and a warmonger, is going to adore Judge Dredd. She's all about strength and being a wolf and being brutal and doing what is necessary no matter the cost, and that is all up Judge Dredd's alley. She's going to adore him. She may even choose Judge Dredd to replace Caitlyn's position in season 2, because the reason why Ambessa chooses Caitlyn is because Caitlyn just had a loss and she wants to take advantage of that loss, put Caitlyn in power so that Caitlyn will be this sort of dictatorish force in Piltover and push her ideals. But if Judge Dredd is there, he would actually be the better option for that on the surface level, because he is a far more brutal, violent, and warlike character than Caitlyn is. So Ambessa might actually choose him to lead Piltover against Zaun rather than Caitlyn. Now, if that happens, will it work? No. Like I said, Judge Dredd is far more intelligent than Caitlyn and most other characters in the Arcane universe. He is a brilliant tactician. He's a master detective, and he's really good at seeing people's motives way before they reveal it to him. He'll see right through Ambessa trying to use him, and he will probably take advantage of it. He may actually accept the position at first just so he can get closer to Ambessa and just so that he sort of has a grasp and can control the situation from the inside. But I do think if that happens and he is the one who is chosen, it's just a matter of time before he turns on Ambessa and has her killed as well for basically trying to start a fucking war. And I don't think it's a stretch to come to the conclusion that Judge Dredd is going to figure it out pretty early. I mean, Caitlyn knows Ambessa's using her very early on and is allowing herself to be used because of her hatred of Jinx and wanting to hunt Jinx down. Dredd is on a whole other level of, I don't know, if this was D&D, I guess you would call it insight. The ability to read people's motives than anything Caitlyn has shown in the series. He's going to see that shit immediately. He's going to go after Ambessa, and he's likely going to win. The only thing that makes the characters in Arcane more powerful than Judge Dredd is the fact they have hex weapons. But if he joins the Piltover police force and is given a high position, which he absolutely would be, he's gonna have his own hex tech weapon. His pistol is already really fucking badass. It's a pistol with like 99 different types of ammunition. It has napalm ammunition, exploding ammunition, homing ammunition, all kinds of crazy different forms of ammunition. Now add hex tech technology into that pistol, and you've got probably one of the most powerful weapons in the entire Arcane universe in terms of like handheld weapons. One shot from that gun to Ambessa is going to absolutely kill her. And the thing is, if this happens, Victor's whole taking over everybody and making this whole hive mind shit that he has going on is never going to happen, because Judge Dredd is never going to allow Ambessa to make an entire army of machines and use them to invade and take over Piltover. He'll kill her long before that ever has the option, and if he doesn't get a chance to kill her before then, he will sabotage that shit and not allow it to happen. Now, is it possible that Judge Dredd can be killed? Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a lot of things that can kill him. A super soldier shimmered person would be able to overpower him. Warwick might be able to kill him. Like, there's a lot of things in the Arcane. Anything that's superhuman or like well beyond superhuman is gonna have an advantage to him because he's not superhuman. However, unlike Rambo, he does have a long history of fighting superhuman beings that should not be able to be fought against by mere mortals, and he does it all the time. He's a fucking comic book character, and his will to push forward and combat skill, quite frankly, is at a level that just most normal people and even superhuman beings just isn't at. So yeah, I think he'll do really well. The only way I really see him dying is if he in some way gets locked in very close range sort of combat with something that could instantly obliterate him in one hit, like Warwick. Maybe Ambessa might be able to beat him in a fist fight, possibly, but I don't think Judge Dredd is going to get into a fist fight with Ambessa. I think he's going to fucking shoot her. And if Ambessa has this resistance to magic, which we know she does, he'll just use a non-magical weapon in order to fight her. So he'll like use a gun that's not a hex tech weapon and just shoot her. And then she'll react as if it's a hex tech weapon, try to use that magical shield thing she has. It'll just go right through her because it's not magic. And maybe in the unlikely scenario that Ambessa is capable of taking over with Judge Dredd there and gets the whole Victor shit going on and builds her army and stuff, maybe he might die if he goes up against Victor's army, because Victor's army is considerably more powerful and honestly just too fast for him to deal with. As you're going to see a lot on this list, those motherfuckers are fast. But I really don't think it's going to get to that point. I think he's going to see this shit from a mile away and deal with it like it needs to be dealt with. Unlike someone like Caitlyn, whose emotional state allows Piltover to get to the place that it is, like she allows it to become so authoritarian because of her anger. Judge Dredd is not an emotional being at all. Victor's whole speech in the show, where he talks about how emotions is both our greatest strength and our greatest weakness, as it causes all horrible things that happen among humans happen because of emotions. Judge Dredd doesn't have any of that shit. He's never emotional. He's as logical and indifferent as you could possibly get. He is a stand-in for the law itself. So everybody's fucking emotional fragility that exists within the Arcane universe isn't going to affect him at all. And I think that's kind of going to be his greatest strength in not only surviving the Arcane universe, but thriving in it. Next up, we have V from Cyberpunk 2077. And just to be clear, I'm not going to be using any of the anime shit for this particular video. I know that the anime Edgerunners is canon to the video games. I get that. I'm not disregarding the events of that game. But you have to admit, if you've seen the anime and played the anime shows a vastly superior level of power than anything the video game shows by a massive margin. If I use that version and I talk about like how V defeated Atom Smasher and then talk about Atom Smasher in that anime, the dude takes on a whole fucking army of like tanks and like a whole military force by himself. Well, you know, David Martinez does it and then he fucking completely throttles David Martinez with ease. So like the power level is just insane over there. In the game, nothing even close to that happens and it's a little more grounded, so I think that would be a better power level to put in this universe, because if we use the fucking anime, he's gonna slaughter his way through all of Arcane with ease. It's not even gonna be trouble. So yeah, I'm disregarding the power levels of the anime, not necessarily the story. Now, having said that, what type of person is V? How will he interact with the world of Arcane? There are two types of RPG main protagonists. There's the RPG type of protagonist where you can literally be whoever you want, play it however you want. These characters are usually voiceless, like they don't have any sort of dialogue. You just click what he says, and you have unlimited freedom to make whatever kind of character you want to make. The other type of RPG protagonist that you can be in these sort of decision-making based games is one where you get to make all sorts of different decisions, but you can't really stray too far away from who that person is. The character is the character regardless of what decisions you make. These would be characters like Commander Shepard from Mass Effect, Geralt from the Witcher series, and yes, V from Cyberpunk 2077. It's the reason why you'll never see me take a character like the protagonist from Baldur's Gate 3 and put him in one of these challenges, because that character doesn't have a fucking character. He's whatever you want to be. But V actually does have a specific character with specific goals and ideas and desires and a personality, and you can actually play the game and determine what you think V would do based on what he does in that game, despite the fact that the game allows you to make decisions and, you know, play how, for the most part, however you want. So what exactly do we know about V? What does he want? Well, it really doesn't matter what way you play the game. He always wants two things. He wants to build connections and find a family, and he wants to be remembered as a legend before he dies. Those are his two desires. Doesn't matter how you play the game, doesn't matter what origin you pick. At the beginning of the game, that is the ongoing desire that he has throughout the entire course of the story. He kind of sort of finds that family in Jackie, and then Jackie dies, and you spend the rest of the game kind of trying to find that family again. And him and Jackie always had this goal of becoming Night City legends. And he continues with that goal after Jackie's death. In Night City, V is what the Cyberpunk universe calls a solo. It's basically a merc. He does any sort of jobs that need to be done for money, and he becomes known far and wide across all of Night City as a guy who gets things done. He becomes so well known for a guy that gets things done that the President of the United States of America calls him and offers him a job. V is the type of person who will do basically any job and work for literally anybody as long as their money is good, regardless of how good or evil they are, all in the name of, yes, while money is a factor, because, you know, the man's got to live, and he enjoys living comfortably, but mainly because by doing these missions, he will become a Night City legend. So what is V gonna do when he gets to Piltover? The same fucking thing. Honestly, these two universes are shockingly similar. He's gonna become a merc, and he's probably gonna become a merc in Zaun. He's gonna go down to Zaun because, you know, the place with all the fucking criminals and shit is where they're gonna be hiring mercenaries. And he's gonna start working for all the crazy gangsters and shit down there, doing jobs professionally for them. He's gonna do that for a while and build up a reputation as someone who can get shit done, probably make a whole lot of allies in the process, including people like Silco, and he'll work his way up to eventually even possibly being able to be offered jobs from people up in Piltover, like politicians and shit, just like he did in Night City. The morality of the job that he does isn't really going to be that big of an issue to him, and he will be perfectly content doing that, trying to make a bigger and bigger name for himself. Now, the one major weakness that he's going to have, or I guess you can call it a strength or a weakness, depending on how you look at it, I think V would probably call it a strength, is because he has this desire to die as a legendary figure, he's going to go out of his way to do things that he normally wouldn't have to do. He's likely going to get heavily involved with the situation between Zaun and Piltover simply because he knows by doing that, he will become more noteworthy within the world of Runeterra. This means that he will very likely be extremely close to the main plot of the story, unlike someone like Rambo, who for the most part would kind of be in the background for a lot of it until it personally affects him. V will actually seek out all this bullshit to try to get involved. And if he does that, he will be wildly fucking successful, because unlike Judge Dredd and Rambo, V is stupidly fucking powerful. He's stronger than pretty much anybody in the Arcane universe. I mean, just having a Sandevistan alone, which increases his speed and decreases his perception of the speed of things around him by 90%, means that basically every single person he comes in contact with, he's going to see them moving barely at all. Super, super slow motion. That's just one ability he has of like several dozen that is going to make him more than powerful enough to deal with pretty much any situation he comes into contact with in Piltover. I haven't even talked about the possibility of taking things like Hextech or Shimmer and putting that in his body and making him even stronger, because I probably should have said this earlier, V is a cyborg. He has a bunch of robotic parts. Being able to incorporate technology into his body is something he does constantly. So he would have absolutely no issues with using Shimmer or Hextech to enhance his body, unlike someone like Rambo and Judge Dredd, who probably wouldn't do that. So how powerful V can get really doesn't have much of a limit here. At least the limit would be considerably higher than anybody else that exists in the Arcane universe. He is significantly faster than those robots that Victor makes. You know those robots I've been saying completely blitz every single person in the Arcane universe? That completely blitzes the first two people on this list? Yeah, he's way faster than they are. He's physically stronger than Warwick, the character that basically one-shots everybody else in the series. He is a master swordsman who fights against several trained samurai. With sword skills so good, he can deflect automatic gunfire out of the fucking air when multiple people are firing at him at the same time. This is without the benefits of the Sandevistan, which give him that massive speed boost I was talking about. He's a tech expert, a hacking expert, a stealth expert, a marksman. He damn near has the skills of every single person in the Arcane universe, with the exception of magic, and then take it all and just put it into one person. He is deceptively fucking broken. He's mentally fortified to such a degree that he's completely immune to cyberpsychosis. If you don't know anything about Cyberpunk, basically cyberpsychosis is this thing where okay, I'm not going to explain it. I've explained it quite a few times in the past. Just know that people go fucking crazy in Cyberpunk, and it doesn't affect him at all. That's going to be pretty useful in the Arcane universe, considering everybody goes fucking insane at some point. Jinx, Jace, Vi, Caitlyn, they all fucking lose their minds at one point or another in this goddamn series. Yeah, that won't happen to V. Yeah, so V's going to be just fucking fine. The only issues that he's going to have in Piltover are the exact same issues that he had in Cyberpunk, which is that his life is on a timer and he's fucking dying. But, you know, if he helps out with all this different crazy shit they got going on in Piltover, and he becomes this very highly respected merc and even helps defend Piltover at the end from Embassa and does all that same shit that everybody else does, he may earn some brownie points with the right people, and perhaps they can use all that fucking arcane magic bullshit to fix his problem. Because in Cyberpunk, magic doesn't exist. So it's very possible that somebody in the Arcane, Victor would probably be able to heal him, which would make him a part of the hive mind. Oh shit. That's the way he's going to lose. Yeah, he's probably going to go to Victor, who is the healer, who will take away his issue, and he's desperate enough to do it. Victor's going to heal his brain problem that's killing him, and then once that happens, he'll just be a part of the fucking hive. So yeah, he'll be dead. He'll die. Because once Victor is defeated at the end of the series, everybody who was a part of that little hive mind ended up dying and going away anyway. So, shit. Oh well. He came really, really close. Last up, but certainly not least, we have Titus from Space Marine 2. And yes, I am talking about Space Marine 2, not Warhammer 40k lore. And the reason why is not like the Cyberpunk situation where he's just too powerful for the verse. No, it's because I really want to aggravate Warhammer fans. I've had so many Warhammer fans comment on my videos telling me that I'm just outright wrong about every little thing I say, despite the fact that a lot of it I like read out of the fucking novels, and I doubled and triple and quadruple checked it, and I just come to the conclusion that y'all just have no clue what y'all are talking about. Like, I've had Warhammer fans with a straight face, well, I'm assuming a straight face, it was in a comment section, but several dozen have told me that weapons in Warhammer cannot damage the armor of a Space Marine. Like, it's invulnerable to damage even in the Warhammer universe. Bolters and heavy bolters and all that other shit, it's just invulnerable. It just cannot be destroyed. What a crock of shit. Look, I get it. A lot of Warhammer fans are cool people. You have to admit, you got a lot of annoying people in your club. So yeah, I'm gonna aggravate you and just go with the game. So how exactly is Titus gonna react when he arrives in the world of Arcane? And this is the part that's going to be kind of weird, because it's really not going to be physical confrontations with other people. I don't think Titus is going to be all that invested on what goes on in Piltover, mainly because his entire life from basically birth for the he's like over 200 years old or some shit, his whole purpose has been to fight for the Emperor and to serve the Emperor. The Emperor isn't in Arcane. The Emperor doesn't care about what's going on in Arcane. If Titus shows up in a totally different world where the Emperor doesn't exist, where like just nothing his whole life has been destined for him to do can keep being done, that's a weird way to word it, but sure, he's just gonna kind of have a really late midlife crisis. He's not gonna know what to do or where to go. He can't serve the person he was meant to serve. He's just gonna be chilling somewhere, but not really chilling, more like stressing out and feeling like his purpose was stripped from him. I honestly think he's gonna become kind of a broken man, like almost a loser, because he can't serve his purpose. I mean, that's what happens to any man that you take the purpose away from. And that's essentially what you would be doing to Titus if you sent him here. Sure, at first he'll keep trying to leave and see if he can get back to his universe and his war so he can serve the Emperor the way he wants to, but after a while, he realizes that the technology just isn't up to snuff or whatever. For whatever reason, he can't leave the planet. What happens then? Like, what can he do? Nothing. He'll probably join some kind of army because he's a soldier and that's what he does. He fights always. So just to sort of give him some semblance of normality, he'll probably join some sort of army. Maybe the Noxus army. Maybe he'll join the Piltover police or something like that, and he'll just be a really big, buff, beastly-ass soldier in one of their armies. But I don't think he'll really care about it all that much. Titus is not the type of person who serves people simply because it's a job, and that's kind of what it would become if he went into the Arcane universe. Because, you know, the Emperor's not fucking there. That's what he wants to do. He wants to serve the Emperor. A story with Titus in Arcane, I think, is not going to be about him overcoming all of the challenges and stuff and things that happen in the Arcane universe. I think it's far more likely that it's going to be him essentially losing his purpose and then getting to know people in the Arcane universe, possibly meeting people that he starts to care about, and sort of learning to acquire a new purpose outside of serving the Emperor, basically having to overcome 2 centuries of indoctrination. It'll be a super interesting story that has virtually nothing to do with the main plot of Arcane. I don't think he's really got a reason to get involved with Silco or really anything that's going on. And if he does, like I said, not really gonna be invested. It wouldn't even really be an action series. It would be a fucking like hard drama, like a hard character study of a guy overcoming his indoctrination and learning to move on now that his, not abuser, but the cult that he was a part of no longer has influence over him. It'd be a really cool story idea. I'd watch that story. Like a way better version of what they did with the Terminator character in Terminator Dark Fate. Remember where like after he killed John Connor, what happens then? Sort of like that, except, you know, don't suck. But that's going to be all for me. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, enjoy the membership. Remember, if you join the membership, you get videos early. And always remember, y'all stay safe out there, you hear?